Hello there. Welcome to Catalyst Energies. My name is Dee. Thank you for joining me. I am so grateful that you're here. Welcome to the Catalyst Astrology Report, where we go into the week's astrology on Friday mornings here on the East Coast of the United States. So for those of you who are live, welcome. Thank you for being here. If you're catching the replay, thank you for taking the time and joining us in whatever way you can. And if this is your first time here, thank you for being here, taking the time to check out Catalyst Energies and this astrology report. So, my friends, wow. I'm not gonna lie, it's a bit of a sobering energy right now. Maybe not everybody is feeling that same way, but I have been feeling it's been sobering. So it got pretty cold here where I'm at overnight. We dipped below the 40s, which is pretty uncharacteristic for the fact we haven't even gotten to October yet. And it makes me think of that dream that I had on the Pisces full moon where I noticed like, oh, it's snowing in September. That's very strange. And of course, that could be symbolic of lots of different things. And of course, that's related to my own personal life and the information that I get through my own intuitive channels and through my own language. But I just thought it was interesting that it finally dipped below 40 as of last night as we're about to come into October. So that's why I'm all bundled up, right? It's cold. It's uncharacteristically cold. And that's something that I feel like we've been also anticipating, at least to a certain extent. So there's been a lot of stuff happening, right? There's been a lot of mobilization over the week. There has been a lot of really strong and devastating weather, at least here in the U.S. Of course, the whole it's not just the U.S., although those of us who are in the United States tend to pay attention more because of the fact that our own coverage in the mainstream and such will really focus on these events. But of course, Pakistan has been having experiences of flooding where millions and millions of people are being displaced. And there's just a lot of this weather and related kind of impact that's happening. And it's getting much stronger and more in our face, right? And so I also feel like that is congruent with energetic stuff in general. So, before we just jump into the astrology, which is really what I want to focus on in today's broadcast, I just want to give some insight here into what to expect in terms of the solar weather over the weekend, because we are going to have this kind of 1-2 punch over the weekend with not only a coronal hole stream, right? That solar wind that comes at us through that coronal hole. And also there's a CME that the flare did not blast towards us, but it was so strong and so powerful that we're still kind of getting sideswiped. So there's going to be this 1-2 punch over the weekend. We also have Mercury stationing direct this weekend at 24 to 25 degrees of Virgo, pretty much coming right back to its opposition point with Neptune when it first stationed direct, or retrograde, I'm sorry. And we have a first quarter moon on the 2nd, which is Sunday, and then we'll look at the astrology leading up to our full moon in Aries. There are so many starseed activations right now, and as I was, putting information together for the just the season, right, for the equinox season and for the next couple of months leading up to the solstice, I was just, I was going through it and going through all the major transits. And at one point I was just like, my God, is it me, or are we really being bombarded? Because it is one after the other through October. And we have eclipse season that's going to be starting at the end of October. We have a solar eclipse in Scorpio. We have a full moon lunar eclipse on November 8th, which, as many of you know, here in the U.S. is our midterm elections. happens on November 8th. We have a full moon lunar eclipse. It's going to be at 17 degrees Taurus and conjunct Uranus, right? And so we know, and we've been preparing, but it is getting sobering now, intellectualizing and even being able to energetically or intuitively have insight into these processes as they're unfolding in real time is certainly one thing. The experience of it is another. And this first quarter square, right? This crisis in our action. What are we going to do? Our first real challenge to the new moon that we had in Libra on the 25th. By the way, the 25th through the 27th is the Jewish holiday of Rosh Hashanah, right? Preparing for Yom Kippur, which is going to be in early October, right? This 10 days of atonement and fasting. It's very interesting. It's a sobering energy. I can't express it enough. That's just what keeps coming through over and over. And this moon in Capricorn, the first quarter moon, and then I'll pull you into the space weather. I have it all queued up now. This first quarter moon is a big Lyran starseed activation. And in fact, as the moon moves through Capricorn, it's going to hit all the major stars in the Lyran constellation. 10 degrees, 15 degrees, which is conjunct Vega, 18 degrees, and 21 degrees Capricorn. The moon is going to meet Pluto during this time as well, like leading towards the end of the weekend, coming into Monday, and it will be opposite Procyon. So there are such incredibly heavy, dense, and this sense of fearlessness that we are being challenged to really embrace. So knowing where Capricorn is in your chart is really helpful to know what areas of life this may be coming out from. And when we have a first quarter moon, that means the sun is in a square to the moon, and the sun will be in Libra. It will have just passed the point where Mercury had stationed retrograde to begin with. And at 10 degrees Libra, we are looking at a calm mind, and with the sun, certainly a calm heart that has the opportunity now to experience some relief and the ability to have poise and inner serenity in order to really look back on those turbulent waters and identify everything about it, but from the perspective of already kind of passing through that. And I think that the square to the moon in Capricorn, which again, a moon in Capricorn is sobering. It's a very serious set of feelings and internal landscape about what it takes to actually accomplish something, a goal, an ambition, not just for yourself, but for all those involved, right? Capricorn is the unfolding of the material matrix, natural law in action, and often will represent the career and in the 10th house in the astrological or chart or the zodiac. So there is some seriousness here, and there is a sense of calmness in our own hearts that in some ways is going to allow us to reflect back on those turbulent waters and the overcoming of fear and its rewards. And what are the rewards? Compassion, trust, right? A sense of companionship in a way that really is mutually respectful. And for me as an Aquarius rising person, and for you Aqua rising people, for instance, right? This is coming into the 12th house. So this is on all layers, karmically, multidimensionally. So when we look at the chart, we can kind of break down, the sign and where you're going to find this first quarter moon, but the Lyran activation. So for those of you who are Lyran starseeds and you're a Lyran starseed and you've really been working with this energy, what does that entail? So Lyran starseeds are coming from the Lyran with a soul frequency and innate soul memory of the Lyran beings. And so very ancient, right? The first humans in the Milky Way galaxy, billions of years of experience, been around the galactic block. They spread out through the galaxy as a means of survival when the infiltration of their system by the Draco was really reaching a pretty a pretty dramatic crescendo, right? And they spread out and made their way to different places all over the galaxy. And just about every star system outside of Lyra, and especially Vega, because that's a big stargate that was shut down, right? That was shut down, and those beings needed to find a new root system, right? And if you think about it in just terms of the cycle of growth, growth and maturity and full contribution to something bigger than yourself, there's also this sense that it all comes back down and returns back to source. One of the big transits, besides Mercury stationing direct this weekend, is leading up to the full moon in Aries, is Pluto stationing direct. Okay, so the engine of the demolition is going to turn back on. We have a full moon in Aries conjunct Tau Ceti. For those of you in the Catalyst classroom, we just spent the whole month talking about Chiron, because of its connection not only to Andromeda right now, but to Tau Ceti, and how when Chiron stations direct, which is going to be at the solstice and at the Capricorn new moon on the 23rd, you're going to see Chiron will start moving back towards this position of being conjunct Tau Ceti. Now, this is a star that's actually very close to our star system. It's only 12 light years away. It's in the belly of the Cetus constellation, the sea monster, or the Kraken, right? And so we talked a lot about this, about the imagery, the mythology, the symbolic archetypal connections to Andromeda, to the Kraken, right? Or the sea monster. So Tau Ceti is in the belly of the beast. It's on the I feel like it's in the solar plexus area of the sea monster or the whale or the kraken, however you conceptualize that. And these beings are descendants directly from Lyran refugees, right, that left their system and resettled. And there's a strong defensive component to Tau Ceti and Starseeds that is on a mission to protect, a mission to not let this, this infiltration that is an invasion that is regressive, that is parasitic, that is controlling, all of those energies. The Tau Cetian beings have a mission, and they are following it. Now, the full moon in Aries that's conjunct Tau Ceti is going to bring up so much around our feelings of responsibility in terms of acting on the potency and desire to preserve ourselves, right? To take care of that inner child, right? And these Chiron themes have just been so salient around this. And again, the sun in Libra, allowing our hearts to find some calmness, a sense of relief, a sense of almost separation of like, I remember being part of that. I remember being in the captain's chair in some ways and going off onto the voyage, onto the campaign, whatever it is, and being able, with that full moon that's coming, which is going to be next weekend on the 9th, to be aware of the ways that we have either inadvertently pulled in and withdrew ourselves because we did not feel maybe safe enough to come out, or we did not feel like we could truly generate our own potency within, in relationship to the world around us, but also too where we've withheld love, we've withheld ourselves, we were scared to come out into the fray or the social environment. And specifically when it comes to Tau Ceti, we are acknowledging the, I think it's going to show us, that there's a time and place for everything. And even if we are not able to generate our own self ourself, right? And the energy and potency and desire of who we are in the social context, we still have the option of pulling ourselves in kind of a dignified way. And the Tausetians, right, they wanted to jump the gun right away, and they needed to kind of be held back until the right time. And I don't know exactly how this is going to transpire in a global way or in a macro way, but we're all going to feel it wherever Chiron has been transiting now for quite a while, especially because it's so close to where Chiron is right now, even in its retrograde. So these themes are really important to have a sense of real responsibility. And again, a moon in Capricorn, right? I mean, a real emotional responsibility towards ourselves and to those that we are part of the larger systems with. And with Chiron, or with Pluto stationing direct in Capricorn, it's just going to be gnarly. And we've been preparing for this, but now it's becoming even more real. It's becoming much more of a powerful resonance to us, and there is something truly to be said for overcoming our fear, and knowing where Capricorn is your chart is going to help, I think, a lot with this upcoming weekend especially. So let's transition over real quick. I want to show you just a few things that have to do with the space weather, and then I'm going to check in with the stream here and see how people are doing. If you have any insight, any feedback, your own experience lately. It's been pretty gnarly, right? And like I said, sobering. And we're really ready for like a big heart opening in a lot of ways. And I think the solar weather is going to enhance this process. It's going to support this process, right? I trust the sun. I trust this galactic process. I trust source, right? And that is something that has a really distinct reward if we can reach out and accept and trust and offer mutual respect. So I just want to show you that the solar weather is already starting to get disturbed, as it were, as you can see in these charts. And by the way, the next series of the Catalyst Classroom, we're going to be talking about the sun, and we're going to talk about it from so many different angles. Obviously, stellar physics, right? The astrology, how to read the sun in your chart and in the houses. But we're going to talk about how to read this information of the solar weather. We're going to talk about eclipses and what they actually mean when the moon eclipses the sun, and when there is the earth in the middle of the sun and the moon, because the moon and the sun are the luminaries. And we've been talking a lot about the eighth sphere from the mystery school tradition, specifically from Steiner's perspective. And the moon is, according to him, the moon is the agent of the eighth sphere. So there's going to be a lot of different angles. And so if you're interested in that and you want to be part of the conversation, if you want to get the information, you can sign up for the Catalyst Classroom in the link in the description box below, or at least get some more information. And if you're not sure, you can always email me and I can maybe send you some samples or give you an idea of what to really expect. Or you can always ask people in the chat, in the comment section, or on Telegram or Facebook, right? Because we've been going at this now for a couple months and people have some feedback I'm sure they would love to offer about this experience. So you can already see that the solar weather is getting impacted, right? When the red line starts to get all, bouncy, especially below zero, there's geomagnetic unrest. The same thing with the blue here, the phi angle flip. When it flips back and forth, right, that there is a bounce or something happening. Now, the solar wind density of particles, the speed, and even the temperature has been fairly consistent, but now there is there is more, I think, to disrupt what is happening. And I think the solar wind is making its way. So like if I bring over the planetary index just to show you, we've already had disturbance overnight into this morning as well. So just be prepared that there's more coming. And if you started to track your physical symptoms in relation to geomagnetic disturbance, to the amplification in the Schumann, which has not been doing much really, the frequency of it has been staying fairly high, right? Above 8 hertz right now, which is a lot higher than it's normally been. when you're tracking your symptoms, how your body feels, right? How your intuition and your subconscious connections, right? Through your dream state, through your meditations, through your energy work, whatever it is, when you're starting to track these things and know how you're going to likely respond to increases in solar activity, disturbances in the geomagnetics, then you can prepare yourself for that. And you can also not freak out about it or resist it. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't take care of yourself, or if you're having serious physical issues that you shouldn't do what you need to do to mitigate that, but that's kind of the whole point. You figure out what works for your body, and you make sure that you are on point with that when you know these things are going to start amplifying. So it's just to give you an idea of what to expect as we move through the weekend. So I also want to share with you, before we move on to the chart, I just want us to take a moment here as well. Oh, where did you go? The reading. Now, the trickster energy has been coming out all week for me in my own readings, in my own dreamscape, right? My astral travel. It's here big time. And it's not necessarily a negative thing, but with Mercury as the trickster in its in one of its roles, right, is about to station direct, and is going to be in a trine with Pluto right before Pluto stations direct. And so it's, again, this area of the psychopomp, as Tamara had brought up actually to me in a message, and as we were talking about all this eighth sphere stuff, but truly the trickster energy is very much here to be a mirror for us. And without the dialectic of the two poles of Mercury as the messenger, how will we ever really know what our choice is? And so, or what choice to make? You know, free will comes from the introduction of this energy, and the trickster is there to provide the counterbalance so that we can really see the full picture. Now, thankfully, Mercury's in Virgo, which is about the intuitive and feminine aspect of Mercury and the mercurial hermetic knowledge and our ability to acquire knowledge, to study, to learn. So it's in this intuitive kind of hermetic and hermit, right? Wow, I never even made that connection till just now, right? The hermit being the card of Virgo in the tarot, and that also being related to Mercury, and it's more about going in. There's only so much information you can take from your conscious mind, and eventually we have to go into the world around us, into our own resources, and organize them, put them where they belong. There's a lot of puzzles that we may not have necessarily known how to finish it, but we've had an idea that there are missing pieces, or we haven't figured out where everything goes yet. It's all about to start turning back on. And so that's where this sobering kind of seriousness is really sitting with me, at least. And it's not meant to instill fear. It's meant to show that we have to reach out beyond our fear, right? To still put out our hand and trust, the creator source, or the great spirit, or God, or however that, speaks to you about the source of all. So just to remind ourselves here about this reading. And I said when the moon is going to come into Sag, which it's at right now, leading up to this first quarter moon, that the Nine of Wands in its reversal, you see that actually the moon is at the top of this card. When it's upright, all the energy is actually drawing down. But when it's reversed like this, you can see that the moon is at the top of the card, and the solar energy is really at the bottom. And we talked about this on Monday during the Starseed ministry, about how there's a lot of apprehension before kind of like the victory, right? But in this reversal, it can be very difficult to really see that, or to embody that strength. And I think that we're really going to feel some sort of disturbance based on the oppression. The trickster is like showing you all of the ways, showing us all of the ways that we have been holding ourselves back and holding ourselves down, based on the really oppressive energy that Saturn can really be. So we're learning a lot right now. And this octopus has come out so many times now. And even with the Three of Scrolls, right, widening our scope. Maybe it has been too narrow. Maybe we've been too hyper-focused on this Saturnian energy or the institutions as a whole. And perhaps we need to widen our scope, right? Be willing to shift into a new shape just to understand what it feels like. And that we have everything that we need, right? I mean, the camel, Archangel Michael, my gosh, coming in as like a divine channel of power, so that we can really face these issues, especially within ourselves. The moon is this kind of personalized experience as well. So I just wanted to, reflect and review with all of that stuff. So let's bring up, well, first what I'm going to do is format everything so that we can have a good view of the chart for today. And then I'm going to check in real quick with the stream and see what's going on, see what people are sharing, get the conversation going, because I think that that's where we learn the most from each other, is in the conversation. So here is our chart for today. It is the 30th of September. It is the last day. So it looks like people are, the stream's doing well, and that people are just kind of jumping on and just listening. And that is awesome, because I am here to talk to you. That seems to be something that I was born with. And I know that there are certain family members when I was a child that it was just beyond tedious that I would never shut my mouth. And I'm glad that I never did, because it's a big part of my journey and my starseed kind of mission, right? My part of fortune, my natal part of fortune. If you are familiar with that and you've gotten readings from me as well, my natal part of fortune is conjunct the galactic center, which, by the way, the moon will be crossing this weekend as well. So it's okay that people are just listening and taking in the information, because I am truly just here to be like that kind of channel. So all right, my friends, here is our last day of September. I hope everyone truly is doing well, and please take care of yourselves. It's very easy right now to kind of get caught up in all of the things that are happening and kind of take that as if that is the only reality. And I think the moon moving through Sag and Capricorn, especially this weekend, is going to really bring out the reality of these situations in a way that may affect us very strongly, especially very personally with the moon in Capricorn as well. Where's our responsibility to ourselves? Where do we feel a sense of responsibility? Where do we feel that we are holding ourselves back with fear? And I think the sun in Libra is kind of perfect right now, especially with Venus now in her home sign of Libra, to really identify within our own expression, our own voice, our own heart's resonance, that calmness and a sense of being and poise and an inner serenity that allows us to tap into those places of real raw fear within ourselves, and be able to also at the same time acknowledge how in past situations we've been able to overcome our own fear. So I got the sense earlier in the week, and I can't stop burning sage. Like, it's just impossible at this point. And it's not something that I take lightly either, because I know that it's a very sacred plant and a sacred herb, and it should be used as such. But I feel like that I've held on to it long enough, and I've gotten kind of the okay to be like, yes, use this. This is what this is for right now. So let's get into it, shall we? Let's get into this. Now, I want to read the degree, first of all, of the sun at 7 to 8 degrees Libra, okay? It's a blazing fireplace in a deserted home, okay? And it's, there's always hope of recovery. And many people, oftentimes, most disciples, whatever that means to you, right? That's a very Virgoan quality. So we've gone through all of this Sun and Virgo energy. This is also when we spent a lot of our doing the Reiki attunements. And I'm going to start a new program very soon on the same, kind of in the same format, except we're going to be doing building a Hatha yoga practice or a vinyasa. That's what I'm trained in, is in vinyasa and Hatha yoga. Because it's time now to start bringing it not just from the energetic template, which what the Reiki was for, but now we're going to start preparing the body, the actual body, and the anatomy, the physiology, our structure, in order to be able to hold that resonance. That's what yoga, right? Hatha yoga is not an end in itself. And that's something that the West has totally totally blew it. And I have to say, when I was trained as a yoga teacher, and then I went to India and studied yoga, it kind of ruined it for me to come back and teach yoga in the format that the West really, and this is not in any way, if you're a yoga teacher, you teach yoga, you practice it in a studio here in the West. It was all Westerners in that time that I was in India. It was a group, and it was, all Western countries, not just the US, but all Western countries that this group was from. And it kind of ruined it for me because, of course, our teacher, who is Indian, and that was his gig, right, at an academic level as well, and therapeutic level. He was just like the West, it's pretty much taking the soul out of it. So it's important to understand that yoga, Hatha yoga, like the physical yoga, is kind of the bottom rung of all the yogas, right? Because yoga is just about union, right? Union of the polarities, union between the material and the spiritual, between our light and dark, the union of our masculine and feminine, right? The union of the body with the spirit. And Hatha yoga, as a physical practice, regardless of what style you do, is meant to prepare the body for the energetic intensification, the upgrade, the full experience of the spirit in the physical. Okay, so if that interests you and you don't have a lot of experience, and that's okay, or you do, we're going to be doing a progressive 3-week thing. So I'll be putting out information about that very soon so that you can sign up and be part of that. Just like the Reiki Healing Attunement, where I do an asana every day, I record it, I go into all of the stuff around it, and then it's a progressive practice. And by the end, you will have a full vinyasa practice that you can use with modifications to actually not only invigorate and strengthen your body, but also deep relaxation and stretching. So that's what Hatha yoga is for. So anyway, I digress. Let's get back into it. And that was the whole point, is that many disciples will find themselves compelled to abandon their spiritual quests when the going gets tough, right? Because there is a lot of empty hour when you start getting into Libra, Scorpio, right? Even Sagittarius and Capricorn leading up to our solstice point. So we just had the equinox, which is that balance point. So we know that it's just going to get darker from here, right? And so this is the time when people really bow out because it doesn't feel all good and fluffy anymore. And many of us know this journey is not about feeling fluffy. It is about real work. And this is why we focused on Chiron so much in the last Catalyst classroom, because that is, in fact, the bridge between our material and spiritual self. And Chiron as a symbolic character, as a being, right? As a means to bypass his own suffering based on, who he was and how he came to be. He mastered those gifts that came along with his immortality in order to assist and teach and heal others. But we can't actually heal and release our own suffering by necessarily doing it for other people. And we have to embrace our own humanity and our own materiality in a way to release ourselves from our own suffering. And that is some really high level work. And I'm just so grateful to the Starseed Fellowship, I mean, it's just been remarkable, the work we're all doing together, right? We're together doing it. It's not me just necessarily saying, I am this incredible mystic starseed activator and I'm going to tell you, or I'm not channeling other beings that are then telling all of us what we should or shouldn't be doing. It's really us doing it together. So this is a big part of this sun in Libra right now. So yes, the vision that is catalyzed by maybe some sort of inspiring like aha moment, there is a reaction of fear and shock that comes out of that, right? And so we might abandon that. We might be like, I can't do it. Ooh, I'm feeling that. I'm really feeling that right now. Oh my gosh. There's always the fire at the center of who we are, and Lilith is the connection, right? Black Moon Lilith is the feminine that holds that flame. So the sun here right now is giving us a place to put, for our heart to resonate with, that even in the most empty hours, there is a spiritual power that's ready to welcome us and warm us up, right? And so maybe you are just, out in the woods being like, where am I? It's cold. It's dark. I don't know where I am. Right. And you happen across this, old cabin and there's actually a fire. This is a great visualization, actually. This is a very good visualization. So I would encourage you, if you need to find a place to really express yourselves, that this is a great way to visualize that, because this is where people bow out. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, depending on what your soul contracts are, but there's always hope of recovery, right? So now that Venus is in Libra, right, the Lady Justice, right, she feels what justice feels like. She's not using her sight. She's not using those specific exclusive consciousness. I mean, she's just gone through Virgo and really fine-tuned her own feels to the process of maturation, of ripening, of patience, of discipleship, right? And so now that Venus is in Libra, I think in her, it can be a little bit as well, kind of very... we can't really talk ourselves out of what it is that we actually feel. But that doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't still more to do in this area. So also, Saturn has moved now into the degree, as we're going to see, has moved as of today into the degree that it is going to station direct at. Also, it is now coming into square within the same degree with Uranus. Oh, there is unexpected change that is most likely going to be resisted across the board with Saturn and Uranus, and it's retrograde. So you may feel it more inside of yourself. It might be an internalized pressure. It may be something that is not fully realized, but the square is going to be very palpable and will continue. Now, they're not going to come into an exact square as far as I can tell. And maybe they will like later in the year when they both are stationed direct. And but I don't think so. I don't think they're going to get right up, and this square, it's strong enough. It doesn't matter at this point. They're going to be in the same degree. And Mars is also still in a trine with Saturn in Gemini right now, too. And this is where Mars is going to station retrograde leading up to the solstice as well. So, and at 26 degrees Gemini. So if you're into Sabian symbols, that is the frost-covered trees with the winter sky as a backdrop. And it's the idea that you strip everything down to its essential archetype of this and that, black and white, back and forth, whatever, masculine, feminine, dark and light. It's going to strip Mars is just going to, the fire of ambition and outward momentum, especially in Gemini, it is like pioneering new ideas. But part of that is stripping everything down to its base dialectic and then stationing retrograde. It's going to be interesting. It really is. And this has really been pulling us into the fray of the dialectic in a very outward type of way. And when it's internalized, I think people are going to really start turning on themselves, possibly. Or the best case scenario here is really, especially with its trine to Saturn right now, is to understand that it's the synthesizing power of our own consciousness that is going to allow us to make the most out of these dialectics rather than getting caught in the false loop of this or that, right? The binary code of off or on. That's great for digital computers, right? Or anything that's programmed. That's not how we function. We move past this. And don't you think it's interesting that you don't even get any emotional energy until the fourth house in Cancer? It is all fire, earth, and air in the first three houses of individual identity. It's not till we get to Cancer that individual expression starts to be more present. Anyway, that's just something I've been thinking about lately. And so it's very easy to really get caught still in those first three houses. But, this is where so much of the energy, Jupiter, Chiron, Uranus, all retrograde, and soon Mars to be retrograde in this area. So there's so much more work that we're all doing within ourselves right now. And while there are big things turning on out there in the social environment, Pluto stations direct, Saturn stations direct during this fall or spring if you're in the southern hemisphere, Neptune stations direct, then Jupiter, then Chiron, right? So, oh boy, it's... without getting too far into that forecast into the solstice time, it's all turning back on. So I just wanted to share that degree of Libra because it just felt so important. And Saturn coming into the degree that it's going to station direct. And you know where this was? When it came into its retrograde shadow, was in February of 2022. Do you remember February of 2022? A lot of people got really sick in the beginning of February. I know I did. And January into February. February 24th was the first push into Ukraine, right? I mean, now it's going to station direct at that spot and start moving forward across all that territory that Saturn covered up till it stationed retrograde, which is like roughly 23 degrees, 24 degrees Aquarius, which, by the way, you don't see it on this chart, but Vesta, the flame, right? The goddess Vesta or Hestia, she is the hearth flame. She's hardly characterized as a humanoid, right, being. It's Hestia or Vesta is often characterized as the flame itself. And this is what the Vestal Virgins or Virgo, this is what those priestesses are committed to, is that flame. So Vesta right now in its retrograde is also sitting at the degree basically where Saturn stationed retrograde. So there's all these overlaps too in terms of the fire within us. And the sun in Libra right now. Where is that fire? You got to know where it is, and it's boom, 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 in your heart. It's in your heart right now. And the sun in Libra is making it really accessible if we identify our own heart space and what the resonance of that is. So the moon is in Sag, like I said. It's going to cross over the galactic center over the weekend. Not to mention, it's going to make really favorable connections to Venus and a trine to Jupiter, right, in Jupiter's sign. And there's so much assistance, right? There really is. Even if we feel like that we're kind of in this closed loop where we don't want to necessarily we're still learning how to establish that big picture meaning for ourselves in some sort of system where our polarities are working within themselves. There is natural assistance that that we can really feel with this trine to Jupiter, this moon trine to Jupiter. But the moon's going to sextile Venus. It's going to trine Jupiter, sextile the sun, right? And there's that fire again. And what is that fire? Well, it turns into an alchemical fire, right? That purifies and transforms the very substance of our life. That's also in a sextile to this sun that is the blazing fireplace in the deserted home. So when if you're feeling like your heart is really struggling, I mean, this sextile with the moon and Sag is going to bring to our internal awareness how that fire is eventually going to be hot enough to perform the alchemy, the transmutation. Now, the moon is also going to move over Antares today. It's going to be in a square to Juno, which is in Pisces, retrograde in Pisces. It's going to be in a quincunx to Pallas Athena, who is in Cancer. And then the moon, in conjunction with the great attractor, is going to be in a quincunx to the North Node. So this is incredible energy, right? Antarian starseeds, geez, this is something you're going to connect directly to. And the great attractor, this is some sort of gravitational anomaly that is intergalactic, that is a center of gravity for a huge supercluster of galaxies. So this is, how to circle, how to square the circle, right? The transmutational symbol with the head of the dragon, right? Where our collective soul is headed in order to evolve and learn right now. How do we make those things fit when they don't fit together? Because Rahu, or the North Node, is in the sign of Taurus, right? This is about not letting our this is about keeping our consciousness close to the source of our own subconscious, or our own or source, right? You're not completely embedded in it, but you're also close enough where it just takes a few steps to go back in the ocean, if that makes sense. So how do we know that that's where, the soul is pulling us, our collective soul is pulling us right now. So how do we not get pulled into the great attractor entirely? We need to at least stay on, the earth. And I think that, again, thinking about it, just being aware of these potentials is going to go a long way. Not to mention the fact that there's a quincunx to Pallas and a square to Juno, these goddesses, right? Juno is our advocate. Pallas is the goddess of wisdom and strategy and war, right? How is this connection to Antares, which is truly a Stargate and more of the maternal mother god part of our connection to source, and is very non-physical. It's the heart of the Scorpion, right? It's the heart of the Scorpion in the Scorpio constellation. And so how do we connect to that place, right? That is the heart, right? What is it that drives the scorpion to strike in the first place? And if you look at Antares in terms of ancient astrology, wow, there is so much military power that goes along with it, because it's not just about the Aries aspect of Mars where we're acting in our own self-interest, but it is something truly about power at a collective or communal level. And Antares is a stargate to the Andromeda galaxy, right? And if you're an Andromeda starseed, especially Andromeda galaxy starseed, you know all about that. So how do we not get pulled into the dramatizing of it? How do we make the most use of that fire that's in us as a physical being, as a strategy? I think there's going to be a lot of ways that we're going to start working with this very heavy, sobering energy today as we move into the moon in Capricorn. So, and you can see that Mercury, like I said, it's going to station direct. Tomorrow's the 1st, so the 1st into the 2nd. And as we go through the day of the 1st, as you're going to see, actually, as I go forward into it, you're going to see a ton more of all kinds of red lines everywhere. So tomorrow is going to be quite the day, right? And the sun crosses 8 to 9 degrees Libra. What's this? This is where Mercury stationed retrograde, right? This was the three masters hanging on the wall of a special room in an art gallery. That's the Sabian symbol. The need to return to source during a confused search for new value in what? A chaotic society. The longing to reground ourselves in the greatest achievements of the past, right? And an attempt to re-identify ourselves with that archetypal essence consciously, okay? So that's where the sun is tomorrow, and let's see here, is eventually going to be in an opposition to Chiron. But just remember, this is where Mercury stationed retrograde. This is where we've come back from that and really analyzed and proofread and gone even deeper into our own intuition to put the pieces together. Maybe that portrait wasn't fully finished yet when Mercury got to that point, and which is the retrograde has been like, okay, maybe it's like those, those 3D magic eye pictures. I keep thinking of this, strangely enough, right? Maybe we needed to come back and, get up to a place where our peripheral vision will allow for us to really see, but the sun will allow us to at least resonate, to identify with this in some way. And again, there's so much hope here and a sense of like conscious orientation to that which grounds us when things are very ungrounded. Venus will cross over the new moon point on Saturday, right? The dawn of a new day reveals everything changed. Now, when the new moon was just setting the intention, Venus is just like, the feels in your actual body, in your relationships, in your material resources. It's going to be a lot more. It's going to be a lot more palpable in terms of what actually is the balance there. Now, Mars is moved by Saturday into a new degree, and this is a tumultuous degree. It's about staging an emotional outburst, claiming the due, and the revolutionary impact of mental concepts upon collective emotions. This is getting very close to Mintaka, by the way, and we'll talk about that in a minute. So, as an individual, right, if you're working with this energy in your own life, this represents that are contrasting spheres of activity, right? Your knowledge and your intuition, right? Your feminine, your masculine, right? Your outside and your inside, whatever it is. The contrasting spheres of activity are taking shape as the result of our individualizing process through the mind, right? As the mind is working with the dialectic, it becomes aware of where the imbalance is. And it does allow for a new approach, right, to the problems that result from individualization, right? There is a very strong push to balance things out. And I will tell you that this degree of Mars is all over the 10th house of Donald J. Trump, right? His natal sun, the North Node in his 10th house conjunct, and Uranus, right? All up in his 10th house. So I also get the sense that, yes, we're going to be addressing these things within our own sphere, but I do sense that we're going to get a preview in some ways of what things are going to be like throughout the winter. And there may be a very strong push or a very, an outburst based on some sort of repression over time that is going to be pushed outward in some ways. That's just... I get the sense that there could be this. I'm not saying there will or won't, and it doesn't really matter because what matters is how we respond to it. But being aware of the potential, I think, is really important. This is what astrology is for, right? So we are reading our own soul's blueprint in relation to the cosmos and not relying on others to tell us what we should or shouldn't be doing or what is or isn't happening, right? This is why astrology will not be necessary really once we get 4th and 5th. But right now in this transition, it is the language that I think is made the most sense. So anyway, Mars is getting into that last decan of Gemini. And by the way, I mean, this is not an easy place. I mean, these are the 9 and 10 of swords, the second and third decan of Gemini, ruin or, cruelty and ruin, because it's our own minds that are cruel. And it's, once we can't use our mind to exclusively to analyze a situation or get past it, it can, we can find ourselves, really needing to start over in some ways. And I suspect that there may be some of this for people who have exclusively been caught in the loop, the feedback loop of this or that. Not to say that there isn't a side to be taking, but if we're not utilizing this energy as a means to transform ourselves, then we really are just like ponging back and forth, even if it's really dramatic. And it may be very dramatic with this, connection to Mars. Just remember that grand air trine with Saturn and Mars, and when the moon was in Libra just a couple days ago, that was a pretty pretty balanced mental and cognitive, mind-based type of experience, I think. So that was important, I think, to really embody, because it seems like now that we're going to really need that perspective of that moon in Libra to kind of keep ourselves balanced as we go through the weekend. What else is happening on the 1st? Lilith is conjunct Procyon again. This is a theme that just continues. It doesn't stop for months and months, right? Lilith will move into Leo a little bit, but then it'll retrograde. It's just continues to oscillate. And that's what that is. True Lilith is the oscillating lunar apogee. It continues to oscillate over this point, drawing us down to a space that has to do with the feels and protection and the sense of consolidation, and what happens when we have to confront social upheaval, and do we rise to the occasion and undergo an inner metamorphosis as the result of this, or do we succumb, right? Is it a successful catharsis or not? And I think Procyon starseeds, every time Lilith comes into opposition with Pluto, it just brings it back up into our sense of, are we feeling empowered? Do we feel cut off? Are we frustrated? What are we doing to compensate for what seems like a lack of power every time? So again, it's going to be the case this weekend as well. Now, let's see here. The moon sextile Saturn. The moon is going to be opposite Mars at this degree. So the use of imagination and a sense of almost like playfulness while we anticipate higher stages of development is going to be really important to, to balance this energy out, right? To have some vision of where it's going within our own selves rather than just that really dramatic outburst. Right? It's like staging some sort of, major protest without any sense of where you want it to actually go. And this has been some of the, as far as I'm concerned, my personal opinion, especially being part of a much more progressive, radical movements, in my early adulthood, this is one of the biggest failures of all of those, besides the fact that they're completely infiltrated and taken over. It's the lack of imagination of where it's going that has been, I think, one of the biggest downfalls of all of these movements. It's just an expression of anger, and it's just an expression of, wanting to, have this dramatic upheaval without any vision or imagination of where it's going. So this moon opposite Mars on Saturday, really important, as Mars is moving into this last decan of Gemini, where it will station retrograde. Venus is going to be opposite Jupiter. Okay, this is actually a quite lovely, I think it's a very lovely opposition. Now, these are two benefics, so even when they are opposite each other, you can't really go wrong, okay? And Venus is at home in Libra. And yes, Jupiter is retrograde. I think that this is really going to establish, hopefully, that, find your community, find the center of communion of those people and those like-minded souls, those new like-minded souls that are ready to move forward, right? Ready to imagine where we're going, ready to commune around a center point of a new creation, whatever it is, right? I think give yourself a break. Honestly, right? Jupiter is already retrograde. So let the retrograde be this contracting kind of, the bellows. The bellows are squeezing together. That's what's keeping the fire going. So, Venus, quite simply, is about asceticism, aesthetics, right? Balance and symmetry, and then relationships that are comfortable, they're beautiful, they're harmonious, right? Venus is attractive. Venus pulls towards her that which she wants in order to feel these things. And I think that this is, just give yourself a break. And if you need to really get shit done, or you're really trying to act on something, I just feel like it's not going, you're going to be working against this energy. You're going to be trying to pull this way when there's so much more on the other side of it. So embrace it, right? Enjoy your loved ones, enjoy your friends, enjoy the commonality, the communion around the fire, whatever it is. And just know that Jupiter is doing what Jupiter needs to do, and it's retrograde. And I know it's hard because Jupiter is so freaking bright right now. It is brighter than anything else in the night sky, because of how close it is right now. And so there is this sense of I have to do these things, or, I need to understand this. I need to understand myself. Ooh, that's a good one. It's okay. Maybe communing around that central fire, maybe you'll find that you understand yourself more than you could have just by yourself, being I'm just going to keep doing it by myself. And this full moon is going to be a big part of this realization, I think. So enjoy it, right? Find some space in order to commune around that campfire, right? Spiritual communion, okay? The moon is going to square Neptune. It's going to square Mercury. In fact, it's going to be in a T-square to both of these things because Mercury and Neptune are pretty much in opposition to each other. So the moon in late Sagittarius, as it's getting closer to the galactic center, is going to be in a T-square to these two. Let's see if I can get, yes, there we go. Love it. Is a T-square. So 24 degrees Sagittarius, right? The bluebird perched on the gate of the cottage, right? It's the good fortune, right? It's the coming home. It's, everything that you've been working for is right in front of you. And if you've stayed true to yourself, if you haven't given up on yourself, if you haven't allowed the dialectic to pull you to one side or the other, but to use that as a means to really learn about yourself, I think, yes, it's square to both of these, right? Because this is mutable energy, mutable earth, mutable water. This is very feminine. But this fire, right? This fire within us, again, is a way to take that energy and find a point of where that energy can go, right? Sometimes it's hard to find the fulcrum of these oppositions. You got to find the perfect balance. The moon is going to kind of make it a little bit easier. It's going to be like a tripod in some ways. And yes, it's square to these things, but that's because it's a masculine fire energy with earth and water. And so, but it is the moon, right? The moon that has a lot to do with Pisces, by the way. The moon card in the tarot is ruling the sign of Pisces. So, and again, the moon is the agent of the eighth sphere if you're into this conversation right now. So again, there is a connection here that can really establish within ourselves, our subconscious, our feels, what it is we're coming home to, right? What do we have to look forward to? What is that good fortune that we feel? That way we don't get caught up in this intensity of Mercury opposite Neptune, which can be, again, a real reality check here. And what's interesting is if we really look down to the hour and the exact degree that the moon is going to square Mercury, it's right when it stations. Down to the degree of when it squares it is when it stations. So this is one of those moments, again, of just feeling into the alchemical fire of who we are, who we've been, how we feel as a means to got to lean into it. We got to lean into Mercury stationing direct at this degree that is a flag at half mast, right? I mean, what it's going to take in order to really fulfill our role, like what it's all for, right? And there's an anticipatory enjoyment of this, right? Again, keeping our vision or our inner vision or our feeling outside of the chronology of time and space, for instance, because the moon does allow that, because it allows us to tap into our subconscious, which is tapped into our soul, to anticipate where it's going, right? To actually enjoy it. It may not be fully there yet, but there's a playful, rhythmic quality to this that, yeah, it's way more serious with Mercury and Virgo of like, this is what we need to do. This is how my mind needs to, work towards this. But there's somewhere that it's going, right? And there is going to be friction here, but I think that if you can embrace kind of this, rhythm of it, right? I think that's really going to help as well. Now let's go into Sunday, because this is the big deal, and this is also where we have our first quarter moon and our big Lyran activation. And then, like I said, the moon crossing all through Capricorn is going to hit Lyran stars across the board all the way. So, whoops. Let's see here. So this is right at midnight on the 2nd, which is Sunday. So now Mercury is stationed. The sun has moved to 10 degrees Libra, which is, again, having passed safely through the narrow rapids. A canoe reaches calm waters. If anybody's into whitewater rafting or anything like that, you know exactly what this is like. The self-control and poise necessary to reach a steady state of inner stability, right? Inner revelation, which brought dramatic confrontation, right? There's that sense of facing something that is like, whoa, can now be meditated upon as it is reflected on the calm waters of the mind. There's a sense of relief here, right? And so we may have a memory of overcoming fear in past situations, or overcoming fear in terms of the way that we contribute to the whole based on these Libra qualities of the harvest, right? And of balance and justice and equilibrium. This is where the moon will square the sun, is at this degree. So in the meantime, though, as we come into the Sunday on the 2nd, you see that the moon crosses the galactic center. I mean, the Mars-Uranus square is pretty strong, and we're going to see that, let's see here. Venus is going, we already talked about Venus being in an opposition to Jupiter. So let's look at these transits. Now, there's a couple things too I want to bring. Let's talk about Lyra for a second before I go into the specific transits, because they're actually very much related to the actual transits themselves. So, one of the things I want to share is that the asteroid, really a dwarf planet, Ceres, right? The goddess of the grain, goddess of agriculture, goddess of the cereals, right? Her daughter is Persephone that went into the underworld, and the idea is that half the year, the reason that the growing cycle is dormant is because Ceres is pulling away all of her bounty, because that's when her daughter Persephone is in the underworld, right? So we see the threefold progress of the feminine, right? The sacred feminine through the phases of the triple goddess, right? So Ceres has just passed into Virgo, right? Speaking of maturing and ripening and, coming to fruition of the crop. 0 degrees Virgo is now in conjunction with the star Regulus. Regulus is the heart of the lion in the Leo constellation. Regulus is related to Archangel Raphael, right? Healing, miracles, blessings, okay? And the heart of the lion, I think that's self-explanatory. Now, there have been tons of cat vibes that people are reporting. I'm experiencing them. In fact, yesterday I went out on my walk and I walked to a pathway, like an old rail, like a rails to trails, like an old railroad that was converted into a pedestrian and bike path that goes for miles, right? So I walk from my house to this pathway, and as I was getting close to the pathway, which crosses Lycoming Creek, which is, runs parallel to where I live. It's a big creek that then passes into the Susquehanna River. So as I was walking down the road about to turn onto the bridge that is the pathway, I saw maybe like 100 yards in front of me, this cat like came out from, the one side of the road, which is an embankment down into the creek, and came out and stopped in the middle of the road and turned around and looked at me, just like a, standard outdoor domestic cat. And I was like, oh, kitty, get out of the road, cat. You never know who's going to drive down. And then on the other side of the road is a property that's got, a pretty open space in terms of their yard. It's not fenced or anything. And it's pretty open. It's not really there's not a lot of foliage or anything. So you can really see around. So I see this cat and I'm like, oh, kitty. And I literally blinked. Like I blinked and it was gone. Like it was gone. And so as I walked to the place where I saw it, I didn't see it. And I looked to see if it ran off into the field. I looked to see if it ran back down the embankment. And, cats are cats. And so there's a very strong likelihood that it absolutely did just run off. But it was like I blinked and it was gone, right? And I was like, okay, wow, that seems pretty clear to me, at least, about this Lyran energy. So the Lyrans will often come they will be personified often in this feline energy, and especially like a white lion, right? And so Ceres coming into Regulus, right? The goddess of the grain, of agriculture, of bounty, of the seasonal cycle that is the mother, right? Is the earth mother, is what gives us life, and is the mother part of the triple goddess. So she comes in now. She is in this sign. This was a big like hello to me, right? That we really are here to not only right now that part of ourselves, that feminine mother part of ourselves that we all have access to. It doesn't matter what your sexual identity, your sexual preference, your gender, whatever it is. We all have the spectrum of the masculine and feminine within us. And we also all go through the triple goddess in our own way, in our own lives. And so for Ceres to be at conjunct Regulus, right, is really a big like ding, 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 ding for me around the Lyran energy. And then to have this Lyran activation with the first quarter moon, what are we going to do, right? It's a crisis in action. Who are the Lyrans, right? The Lyran starseeds, they are fearless. These are people that do things that other people are like, I'm not going to ever do that. What if, right? Lyran starseeds will like emancipate themselves really early on, or they'll move out of their home really young, right? Especially if you have really overbearing parents or really protective parents. Lyran starseeds are like, I'm out, right? So when I was like 20, I was out. I made my way to the West Coast and I didn't look back, right? I did come back for a little bit, but ultimately, I can't be held down in that way. And it's not like Andromeda where it's just freedom. It's a fearlessness in order to accomplish something, to reach a goal, right? That you move past your fear. And the Lyran starseeds will do things like that. They will sell everything they own and like take a trip around the world, right? And not even consider all of the what ifs, right? They will be that exchange student that goes to a foreign country and doesn't speak the language and comes back fluent because they weren't deterred by the fact that there would be a language barrier. That was my freshman year in college. That was my roommate in the dorm. That's exactly what she did, right? She didn't speak a lick of Spanish, and she went to Argentina for a year in high school, and she came back completely fluent, right? So the idea here is that the Lyran starseeds, that part of ourselves, it's fearless because coming into physicality and material reality is something that they've been doing for a long time now. And you have to push past your fear. You have to reach out your hand and trust to nature, natural law, to Mother, Father, God, to the Great Spirit, to your own sense of what you want to accomplish, because you can't do it unless you push past that barrier and ride the wave of the unfolding fractal of nature instead of trying to control for it. So the heart of the lion and the blessings and the miracles that can really transpire when we do face our fear and overcome it is substantial. And the bounty that is likely to be presented to us, what comes to fruition, what is growing and what is bearing fruit is really, really strong right now. So I encourage you, whatever ways that you connect to that Lyran part of yourself, and it doesn't matter if you're a Lyran starseed or not. It's all still part of our experience here. We're all these starseeds, right? We all have the genetic compendium of all of these beings, whether they're actual out there in space and time, or if they're expressions of the human journey in a different resonance and density. Either way, we all have connection to it. So this is big. So when the moon comes into Capricorn, it's going to trine Ceres right there. And a sense of, there's a lot of power that we can step up and gain, but we also have to accept the fact that when we do that, we run the risk of always wasting that energy by trying to control it or to, control others. And that's about going to war. Right? It's about going to war. And 2 degrees of Virgo, which is where the moon will be in a trine to Ceres, over here in Regulus, is about compassion, right? It's about the blood of the heart has to wash the third eye clean, right? You don't just get to stay in the upper chakras and expect to go through this process from 3rd to 4th to 5th. You can't. It's part of the Christ coming into the human form of Jesus, right? It's Chiron who accepts his mortality as a means to release himself from his own suffering instead of attempting to, basically creating the savior-victim dynamic through staying in those kind of upper chakra areas. So there's something to that. And without the suffering, which is Chiron, right? Without the suffering, real suffering of our own humanity, how can we ever really release ourselves or guide other people to help them release themselves from their own suffering? So this is a big connection this weekend that is going to also remind us that we can't just keep holding on to control because the damage that we do within ourselves is so much greater than what we think is the damage through the experience of maybe some sort of suffering. And Virgo in the 6th house, that is what we do. We often will suffer in that area because we either have to, stick to a schedule, we have to stick to a self-care regimen that is not very glamorous or tasty, right? I'm thinking about foods and stuff, right? We have to do things that don't satisfy our heart's desire necessarily, but in order to fully realize it, we have to be able to create a space that can hold it. And the Ceres connection is just remarkable this weekend. So that's why I wanted to bring that up, because there's just so much. For those of you who are familiar with Kiana from, now she's moved. She's made a transition to the Sanctuary Code as her as a container for her offerings. And she shared with me even that there's just been a lot of her own guidance around this big cat energy too. And she's got a strong connection to Lyra. So I'm making connections, and you are welcome to share what yours are if you have any to share. So, I'm going to check in with the stream real quick before I kind of finish out with the week's astrology. So, Light on Change, haven't seen you in a while, baby. Thanks for being here. Great hoodie. Oh, I'm so glad you said something because I really wanted to tell the story about this sweater, and I will. Hope everyone is doing well and hanging in there. Roller coaster ride is heating up, and we got this. Yes, exactly. We got this, right? I tried to leave home at 16 for 3 months. This is also light on change. Not because home was bad. I took off to Florida with $99 in a box in 99 too. Yes, that's exactly when I did it, and didn't come back to Oregon until 2018. Wow, maybe I'm a Lyran Starseed. I'm sure you are. I'm sure you are. I have no doubt. Okay, I wanted to tell the story about this hoodie because I actually think it's strangely really relevant. So, when we were Seth and I traveled, as many of you probably already know, I talk about it a lot because it was a hugely profound experience for me. Speaking of being free, right? Andromeda Starseeds, by the way, traveling is like spiritual. It's a spiritual form of expression. So we went to Western and Central Europe. We did a cruise on the Mediterranean. But when we were in Poland, we spent a number of days in Krakow, which is just amazing. And I'm really sad to see, honestly, Poland they have been on the other side of fascism and communism just nonstop for centuries, right? And that place is just amazing. I really just loved my time in Poland. So one of the things we did, I was just like, I really want to shop here, but things are really expensive, like in more of the like the mall and stuff like that, or like in higher end shops. So I was like, well, let's go thrift shopping in Krakow and see what that's like. So we found a thrift store, and it was kind of like the bins. If you know the bins in in Oregon and in the Portland area, the Goodwill has the bins, right? It's not anything like that big, but they had kind of the same feel where they would have these big bins of clothing in the thrift store. Now the thing about women in Poland, and the men too, and people in Europe, right? The European sensibility. They really, they think that Americans, it just kind of, they can't wrap their minds around, or they just think it's really weird that, American, especially women, right, are going to be like going out in their sweats and then their track suit and their track pants and stuff, like being real casual, going out in public. That's something you don't do at least in Poland, and a lot of places in Europe. So, but it's expensive to shop and to buy really quality clothing. So when I was in the thrift store in Krakow, I found this sweater, right? And I love this sweater, and I made sure I made room in my luggage to carry it back with me, even though it's like huge and bulky. But those women, they were not fucking around. I'm sorry to swear, but it was true. They were like, there were no manners. There was no politeness. Man, these women were in there to win it, right? They needed to find clothes because they needed to still maintain their standard of, how they dress and how they present themselves. But in a way that was affordable. And so there was a lot of elbowing, and there's a lot of kind of like underhanded, just like people were just out for themselves. And it blew my mind. And Seth was just like, I just watched him just like, you know what? I'm just going to blend into the background on this wall over here, because the women were just like, just going through things, and there was no space, like I said. So that's where I got this hoodie, was from that experience. But isn't it interesting, like the way people will kind of like go after what they want? And in that situation, there's no harm really. It's, how Americans are, like, we're just like, get out of my space. And in other parts of the world, it is not like that. So for me, it was just kind of an interesting social research moment of just being like, whoa, check this out. Like, these women are like hawks, and they are going for it. But if you think about that in a larger context here, especially in this Capricornian context, with the moon coming through Capricorn, right? If, there is a need in some ways for us to experience the loss or the waste of energy by going to war in some ways. And we know that this is what's happening out there on the world stage right now. And I think this is going to be a big part of this weekend for us all personally, and also out there globally too. And to no, like I said, the blood of the heart washes the eye, right? It's this idea that this wisdom and compassion come directly through suffering, which is like such a, Jesus as the Christ, or, Siddhartha as the Buddha, right? Those, and take it, take it down the line, right? Of all the archetypes, that is, it just reminds me of it. I just wanted to tell the story, and I'm so glad that you brought it up. I was just like, I wonder if somebody's going to ask about it. So, I want to go overseas and thrift shop. Yeah, I do too. Some incredible places. I mean, I wish I would have thought of doing that sooner on our journey, because I probably would have done it in all of the cities we went to. Megan says, hi, I came late and have to jump again soon. Love, love, love traveling and have done lots of it. Have a great weekend. Buckled up and ready for the ride. Yes, good job, Megan. Buckled up and ready for the ride. Yes, I'm not trying to put any kind of doom and gloom on this weekend. I'm just trying to put the severity, not even severity, just the intensity of it, and you get on one of those huge coasters at Six Flags or whatever. I live near Hershey Park, and it's all huge coasters there. You know what you're getting into, right? You know what you're getting into, but you can't conceptualize what it feels like in your body until you're going up that hill and you're going down that first hill and you're going in circles and you're screaming and you're laughing. And some people are so terrified and they're like, why did you put me on here? That was the first time. Oh, never mind. I won't tell that story. That's a little too personal. Just to say that I've been in situations where somebody went on a ride like that with me to, thinking that they were going to appease me, and you know what I mean? Like, just try to give me a seatmate, and they were white as a ghost by the time it ended. And I was like, oh, you didn't have to get on this ride. Like, and so some people, it's going to be like that. It's going to be like the blood drains out of their face, and to have compassion, right? To be easy. And that's, again, Venus opposite Jupiter right now. You don't need to figure everything else about and understand yourself right now. And maybe there's something to just, coming together around the fire of, the spiritual fire that centers us all. I think there's something really strong about that. So, gosh, you guys are so great. I love the comments, and I love I just love all of the what's the word I'm looking for? Just the ways that we're all coming together. And then Sarah says, Japan had recycle stores that had sometimes new items for really cheap. I still have many items I got from there. There you go. Right? That makes sense too, that Japan would have something like that as well. Yeah, maybe we should just plan a trip to thrift shop all over the world. Doesn't that sound fun? That sounds really fun. I'll just go thrift shopping here, but like doing it in different countries, you get to kind of see how people operate in that way. Anyway, all right, story time is over. Let's just take a quick look here at what the next week is going to bring, because we're leading up to a full moon and Pluto stationing direct. So the big issues that I see, besides the fact that the moon is going to meet Pluto, we're going to see it's a lot of moon transits over the week. The moon's going to come to Capricorn. The moon's going to come into Aquarius at the early part of the week. By the time we get to Thursday, this is where the bigger transits start to come back up again. And Mercury is going to trine Pluto retrograde on Thursday the 6th. So if we go forward to the 6th, you're going to see, so you can see that, all the action is settling down just a tiny bit. Just a tiny bit. But here's Mercury now direct in a trine to Pluto, and this is on Thursday the 6th. So we're leading back up to our full moon. So when we have these third quarter moons, the essence of that transit is right there in that moment, but the reverberation and the way that we adjust ourselves is what we do over that second lunar quarter, right? Throughout the week from the first quarter moon to the full moon is the adjustment period as the moon moves through Capricorn, as it moves through Aquarius, and especially as it starts to move into Pisces before it gets to the full moon. So of course we're going to have another moon conjunct Neptune. So also pretty strong, powerful, emotional connections to our own soul, right? The moon coming into conjunction with Neptune. And really the dreams are always so strong and very vivid, usually when this happens. But Mercury in a trine to Pluto right before it stations direct is this kind of reminder in this balance point here, a foundation within the material aspects of Mercury, who is able to actually go into the underworld, having this connection. It's like shepherding our souls in some ways. And there's a sense of refinement here that is really going to anchor us. It's like, imagine if there's like some sort of upheaval or an earthquake or a landslide. And I'm not saying literally. What I'm saying is that the root system itself and the means in which it gathers resources is so established and all you have to do is follow the pathway, while the institutions that have grown from it already are going through its natural process of degeneration leading to metamorphosis. I think that this is going to be very important to consider once Pluto stations direct right after this, which is what we're going to see here. What we're going to see here as we get into next weekend. And so we know the moon's coming into Pisces on the 7th, which is Friday. And of course, we'll be talking about all of this stuff on Friday in the broadcast. But now we say the moon is in a conjunction to Neptune, and coming into a square with Mars. Mars is conjunct Mintaka. That's going to be something we'll talk about next week a lot more, because the Mintakan essence is coming in really strong too. And like I said, I'll talk a lot more about that next week when I can really kind of wrap my mind around it and be able to explain it, because it's still very formless in a lot of ways, at least for me. Maybe not everybody is having that experience, but the moon and Neptune together in a square to Mars, I think we're going to have a really, really strong, very sensitive and powerful connection to our, truly what we are identifying as what our actual dharma is. How are we going to centralize our energy and our focus within the collective spiritual process here that it's going to cause a lot of friction truly with where Mars is. That really is pushing out and acting out and moving forward in a lot of ways when it comes to finding an organic synthesis, at least starting to work with that energy of synthesis, right? It may be more like, a couple dancing around each other, or kind of like creative synthesis, but in a way that's like, the little birdies in a nest high in the tree. It's protected. It's got this sense of organic bioenergetics to it. And I think this can also, this along with Pluto stationing, can also have people just kind of like, you know what? I'm just going to give myself over to Source, and whatever that means. And maybe that's what you need to do. Maybe some people are going to need to embrace more of this Mars and Gemini. It really depends. But there will be a friction here that is basically based on the idea that if there is no resistance, what do we act upon? And you may find that the resistance totally melts away with the moon and Neptune together. And then you're going to be like, uh-oh, now what do I do? Because everything was built up around that. It's going to be, next weekend is going to be something else. And as we get to our full moon, right? Our full moon in Aries, that's conjunct Chiron, which is, is on the 9th, but I'll just show you the 10th at midnight. So it has already passed it. Let's look at it. Let's just look at it, right? just so we have a visual here. There it is. There is the sun opposite Chiron, or the sun opposite the moon. We have Venus opposite Chiron as well at that full moon. So, and then Mars square Neptune as well, still coming into that square. So we'll talk a lot more about this next week. So one of the things I do want to share with you, always the formatting. One of the things I would like to share is I am still keeping the equinox readings open. They're 90-minute readings or more, personal astrological forecasts for the entire season. I'm going to leave this open, I think, until the full moon, okay, to book if you're still interested. It's a lot of time, so there's a lot of material that can still be covered even though we've already passed the equinox point. So you can book that through catalystenergies.net, or you can send me an email and request this reading. The other thing I want to share is for Aries people in particular, but certainly for Libra people as well, Libra or Aries sun, moon, and rising. With this Aries full moon coming, this is a great opportunity to check in with the lunar transits in your chart at a discounted rate. So for Aries and Libra people, 30 or 60-minute recordings just about the lunar cycle is available for you guys as well. So catalystenergies.net, that's in the description box below. So my friends, thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so very much. Stay tuned for upcoming offerings and changes, and next week we will do our usual Starship Zoom gathering. So if you're interested in what all of that is about, there's actually a link to a video in the description box called The Intro to the Starseed Ministry, and there's a link to how to sign up for the Starseed Fellowship and the Catalyst Classroom, which is just such an amazing space so far. We're really learning so much from each other, and I really appreciate everybody's contribution. And you have access, and also too, one of the things is that if you are a monthly subscriber, not only are you getting access to all of that content through the Starseed Fellowship and the Catalyst Classroom, if you're doing that, but subscribers get discounts on all of the reading offerings that I give. So like that astrological forecast for the equinox is at a discount if you're a subscriber. So that's something else to consider. And if you just want to support this work, these broadcasts that are free to you on Mondays and Friday every week, you can do that too by subscribing monthly, or just sending a donation my way through catalystenergies@gmail.com through PayPal. That's always an option as well, and that's very appreciated to keep all of this stuff going. So, my friends, I love you so much. Thank you so much for being here. And I'm just checking in with the stream real quick. Light on Change says 10/8 is actually 8/8, October 8th, September 7th. So all this talk on 8/8 in the truther community is making me curious about what may come on that day. Well, I mean, they said that about the 24th too, right? I mean, the thing is, they're trying to poach. There's just so much poaching of our energy rather than us actually reading the energy ourselves and coming to conclusions about our own soul journey in relation to that. And I'm not saying things didn't happen on the 24th. They absolutely did. We already talked about that. We talked about how that was when the mobilization in Russia happened around that time. There was... what else happened? There was something else that was significant that I remember bringing up, and I was like, in fairness, there was things that happened, but it wasn't this huge, deliberate event. And I feel like that it's always the next date and the next date and the next date. And it's like, if you just read the astrology yourself or tap into your own intuition and fine tune that vessel and that antenna, then it's like you don't have to get pulled into this constant harvesting of all of our loosh. And I'm not saying Light on Change, please do not and I know you don't misunderstand me. I think that there is so much potential that is happening. But it's like they know what the astrology is. That's why they're putting it out there. So, you can just kind of bypass that entirely and just listen to me. I'm just kidding. And listen to yourself, right? But I do feel like that we are reaching this kind of fever pitch, absolutely. But you don't want to give your energy away to those who are trying to use it for their own great reset, right? We are using it for our own evolution, which is natural, it's organic, and it's happening. So that's the other thing too, is that being able to overcome our fear of the what if. It's like the reward is realizing that God's plan has been here all along, and that's part of the Lyran energy too. It took a lot of courage for them to leave their home and to spread out. And I'm not saying that we're going to have to do that either, but what I'm saying is that that's the fearlessness that is necessary. And we've already kind of, many of us have already done this at a soul level. And the Atlantean template is so close to us right now that it's almost effortless if we are aware of it and aware that we're here to right a terrible wrong, right? As Alex likes to say about the A's. So with that in mind, my friends, I'm going to move on from this broadcast and this live stream. Thank you so much for being here. I truly appreciate each and every one of you so much. Thank you for the work you're doing in your own life, right? The compassion you're showing yourself, forgiveness that you are showing and offering to others and to yourself, right? Take care of yourself. You are totally worth it, and we totally got this. So I'll see you on Monday for the Starseed Ministry. Take care, everyone. Bye.